G.A.M.E 365 podcast. I'm in the building with Melvin Slaughter, CEO of Proper Management Consultant. How you doing, bro?
I'm doing great.
That's good, man. I wanted to highlight, small business spotlight, bring you to the table, let the world know who you are, and you can speak about some of the things you got going on, where you're from, how you came up, and how you transitioned to the CEO and the visionary you are today,
And I thank you for having me, man. I appreciate it, man. Shout out to 365 G.A.M.E too.
For sure, for sure. Let's start from the beginning, man. Tell the world, where you from, where you grew up at, and how was your childhood?
I'm from Seattle, Washington, the Central District. I grew up in the CD, 26th and Spring to be exact. That's one street over from Union. Everybody knows Sammy's was right there on Union, but we grew up on the next block over, which is 26th and Spring. Mm-hmm. Of course, before the gentrification, when there was a lot of black community members and black families living on the same block. Shout out to the Smileys, shout out to the Johnsons, shout out to the Collins,
Sure.
So, yeah.
How was it growing up in the CD? As you know what I'm saying? Well, you grew up in the 80s?
I grew up, I'm an 80s baby, so I really grew up in the,
90s kind of.
The 90s going into the 2000s.
How was the streets back then? Just kind of like just the atmosphere, you know what I'm saying? Because, having the black community together and being able to walk from house to house and be here at these playgrounds and these community centers and these events and stuff, there was a different type of energy and vibe amongst the blacks back then,
Yes, it was a very, very different vibe. And it was about community, we had community center, Garfield, Teen Life Center, and that's really where it all started for me. Mm-hmm. Shout out to my twin sister. We would always go up to Garfield late night and Teen Life Center, and there was a lot of programming. Mm-hmm. That's where I learned how to swim at Medgar Evers. I learned how to hoop at late night. Played for Garfield Community Center. And it was just about community. Back then, you can go to the store or you can go to a party or a function and, it was safe because everybody knew everybody in the community, whether you was from Union, Duce, the Valley, Cherry. You can go up to Cherry and just, feel part of community. Man, you can go up to Union and feel part of community, Yeah, shout out to Jimmy Jam. I used to go to the block and I would see, hey man, I need some 10 sacks. 10 sacks was that big back then. You might roll 3-4 blunts back then, for $10, But yeah, it was a part of community, man. Me and my sister, we used to go up to the Teen Life Center on the weekends too and get the free lunch. They had free lunch. Shout out to the chocolate milk. They had the chocolate milk, the white milk. And then also just the sports and the engagement was a little different back then.
CAY.
Yes, CAY. Yeah. And then the Negro League. We had the Negro League back then. You know what I mean? And it was cool because no matter what sport you were in or no matter what you were doing, it was about community. It was about the black community. Yeah. And I go through it today, and I just kind of took my daughter to my old house that I grew up in, 937 26th Avenue, and it just looks so different. Everything is gentrified now.
Super gentrified.
Yeah,
So, what did Seattle, give you as far as, the man you are today? Like, what kind of principles and things did it instill in you? You know what I'm saying?
Seattle taught me a lot. Seattle taught me about, how to be versatile. You know what I mean? Growing up in Seattle, it's a multicultural city, even though the CD is predominantly, back then it was predominantly black, but it still was a melting pot of multicultural. So you might got, the Asians, you might got the Africans, you might got, a different demographic to be able to tap into. Yeah. So it just made us real filthy. That's where the word filthy comes from. You know what I mean? Yeah. And you're able to be versatile. And that's why a lot of people nowadays, they talk about style and us having an identity. Yeah. We got an identity. It's just the people that are not from here don't really understand that. They think it rains 365 days.
Don't they?
When really we get 4 seasons. Summer, winter, spring, and fall, man. Come tap in, man. So yeah, that's what Seattle gave me and taught me, which is how to be authentic, how to be true to yourself, and how to be versatile.
Yeah. Was it, something, as a youth growing up that gave you a specific vision on a direction you wanted to go in your life?
To be honest with you, my first love is basketball. I was a hooper. I hooped, and I hooped with a lot of my friends that actually went to the league and kind of, chased their dreams to become NBA players. But my first love was hoop. And then obviously I've been around hustlers my whole life. So being around that entrepreneur spirit is kind of what propelled me to want to become my own boss, a business owner. Seeing people like Earl, barbershop, shout out to Earl, who was like the first, young black that I knew from my generation and my era to be a black business owner. And just looking back, man, he paved the way to, if somebody that has been consistent in the game of having a business and running a legit business. Of course, there's others, but I'm just highlighting somebody that I looked up to when I was a kid coming up as far as an entrepreneur and a black business owner.
For sure. So, what is something that a lot of people don't understand on how you can go from the streets to the corporate world or into the business world, and how it's heads and tails?
I think that a lot of people just operate from a place of fear, the fear of challenging yourself and the fear of the unknown, when really it's the same method when you think about hustling. Everything is not guaranteed, right? When you think about being in the game and hustling, you go out on a limb, you take a leap of faith, when you're chasing that bag. And it's the same when you're doing something positive. So I think when you transition to becoming an entrepreneur, a business owner, you just have to believe in it wholeheartedly and not skip the steps. When you're hustling, you're able to skip a step, or you might take a little tiny loss on this and you can grind it back up. And it's the same with business. The only difference is you don't have to risk going to jail when you're doing something legal. So I think that's what we need to instill in our youth and our younger generation about transitioning from the streets to being legit. It's just not skipping steps, doing your research, and just being more intentional about reaching your goals one step at a time.
So speaking of jail and prison, we all, from me, the CEO of G.A.M.E 365, to a lot of cats coming up in Seattle, as certain generations had to just go walk the yard and go through that type of struggle. But what did that, when you had to go do your bid, how did that affect you psychologically though?
Man, that's a really, really great question. It affects you psychologically all across the board, because being in a system that is designed to keep you institutionalized, it will affect your relationships. It can affect your work ethic. It can affect your, how you parent, and if you allow it. Me, when I got my 14 years, the day I went in, I told myself I am not allowing them to institutionalize me. So anytime they ever tried to, tear up my cell or punitive punish us for something, I would always remind myself, like, Mel, this is temporary. This is not my home. And I didn't mentally, I was battling with them to not allow them to institutionalize me, because what I learned that a lot of the officers become institutionalized, right? And then you have officers that's institutionalized that is supposed to help rehabilitate us. Like, how does that work? When you got people that are institutionalized, so only thing they know is the punitive, the punish. They don't really know the rehabilitation because they're institutionalized. All they know is lock them up, lock them down, put them in the hole. They become robots. You know what I mean? And then, you got somebody like me that get to see both sides of it. So I used to try to talk to a lot of the COs and just make it make sense to them. I'll give you one quick analogy of something that happened. I was working in the warehouse. I was working in food service. I was running the whole food service. So I was in control of the ordering and the receiving for the inmates and the officers, food. A lot of the bros that didn't have income coming in, they would take food, cut some meat, some cheese. But that's because they ain't got nothing in their locker and they're taking it back to have something later. Everybody in jail thinks, oh, you're in jail, you get 3 meals a day. Yeah, you get 3 meals a day, but it's portion control. Man. You see what I'm saying? So what about when you're hungry at the end of the night after you've been slaving all day and you don't have no income? So I told the officer one day, I said, have you ever thought about looking at it from our perspective, and instead of taking the food and throwing it away, as long as they're not around here causing problems, and as long as they're not around here that they're being knuckleheads, let them take that little bit of food so that they can have something to eat later, and it's going to motivate them to want to get up and come to work again. And the officer said, man, I never thought about it like that. I said, yeah, that's because you never thought about actually being in prison before. Man. So that was like a defining moment where I felt like I was able to get an officer to understand our point of view instead of always being punitive. You know what I mean? Actually have a little bit of compassion and empathy for somebody that's hungry. You know what I mean?
For sure. So, what by really just doing time and shit, man, how did that kind of change the direction of the way that you value your time?
That's a really great question.
You know what I'm saying?
Time is valuable, right? So doing time, you're in a situation where you are forced to have time management skills. What I mean by that is you get up every day, you have to be at a call out, you have to be at dental, you have to be at mainline. Everything is controlled movement, right? Man. So you can take that as a negative or you can take that as a positive. So how I flipped it for me, that I try to share with everybody, is that when you release to the streets, you have to have great time management skills, right? You have to know how to make time for your kids. You have to know how to be intentional about your job, right? You have to be intentional and have good time management skills for, your mental health.
For sure, that.
Most important, right? Our mental health and our emotional well-being. So for me, I just flipped the script when it comes to the institution, and I just learned that it's more effective to have good time management skills. And that's kind of what I got out of being in prison and being on controlled movement. I just flipped it to a positive and just said, hey, we're going to have to apply these same skills just when we go home to our family on how to have good time management skills.
That's for sure. We're in a real unique day and age in Seattle right now, bro. And seems like all our youngsters is dying or going to prison, doing stuff, that is just getting caught on camera and just placing themselves in, fucked up situations and predicaments. And I don't think they realize, how they're ruining their future. So me saying that, is there any advice coming from where we come from the struggle, coming from the system, coming from the hustle background, coming from the streets, and whether or not we were involved with violence, we witnessed violence, we seen it, whatever. Is there any advice that you can give one of these youngsters out here, or all of them, if you had them in a room, to steer them in a different direction and show them how important their life is, their freedom is, their family, their entrepreneurship, a career, etc., etc. You know what I'm saying?
That's a really great question. My advice to the youngsters in this new generation is to take a moment and just breathe a little bit, man. I feel like with the day and age, how social media is, how everything is hyperfized. That's a made up word. But everything is like instant gratification, right now, impulsive. And I feel like if they just, my advice is to just slow down, breathe a little bit, man. And if y'all need any help, if you need to just, communicate with somebody that's been through what you've been through, don't hesitate to reach out, man. You know what I mean? Sure. Put your pride to the side. If you need somebody to talk to, because a lot of people got pride, and there's a disconnect in communication. A lot of times the youngsters don't feel heard. They don't feel validated. They might be going through something emotionally, but they don't know how to talk because, quote unquote, I'm not saying all parents, but the communication style between the parent and the child might have a disconnect. So you might get a parent that communicates aggressively, but the child is not receiving what they're saying because the communication, there's a disconnect, right? Yeah. So my advice is to just take a deep breath, breathe a little bit, and don't be afraid to ask for help. If you're struggling internally, or you're struggling mentally or emotionally, just don't be afraid to ask for help. There are organizations and there are people out here that will stop what they're doing to communicate with you at a level where you can feel heard and validated, and then we could talk about replacing the anger and the doubt and the fear with more positive things that can guide them in a different direction.
So, when did you realize along, your journey from being a teenager until doing your time into being a grown man that you were a visionary, a thinker, innovative, man? Like, where did you decide that, I'm finna go in here, I'm not gonna waste my time while I'm doing time, and I'm finna study, I'm finna learn, and I'm finna create something that I can take to the streets, which is proper management consulting that I'm going to go back to my community with. I'm going to go back to my region, the Northwest, state, Seattle, et cetera, et cetera. I'm going with that. Where did you decide that, that was something that you wanted to do and you just stopped wasting time? Niggas be in there playing spades. They just arguing about love and hip hop. Who's Lil Wayne better than Tupac? They play hoop, which is cool. You working out. But I'm saying, like, when did you realize that, what? I'm going to go out with a plan.
Of course, before I got locked up, the city that knows me prior to me going to prison, I've always screamed proper management. I can be totally transparent. At that time, it was just a thing, right? It was just something cool to say, and I felt like, I would pop slick and I'm properly managing myself. But once I actually got incarcerated and I started to see, like, I can change this narrative and really have a huge impact, right? Because if you properly manage your mental health, you properly manage your emotional well-being, you properly manage your spiritual, your finances, then you're well balanced all across the board, right? So when I came in, proper management had a meaning, and before I came in, proper management had a different meaning. When I came in, I was able to revitalize it, right? And I got excited because I really felt like I had a quote unquote, spiritual awakening, right? Where God revealed to me, like, hey, man, you need to be of service. This is what proper management means. Now, at this stage in my life, right? At 42, for sure. And that's kind of where I've always been a creative. I've always been a visionary. But I just never had the plan or the direction. So once I was able to sit down and allow God to guide me, to educate me, to let me learn about mental health and trauma and anxiety, all of these things that we grew up with when we were kids, like in my household, it was normalized. So I thought it was okay to have anxiety and deal with depression and, deal with the emotional traumas that we deal with. It was so normal in my household.
Dysfunctionalism.
I just thought it was normal, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Until I started really educating myself and understanding that some of the things that I went through and that others have went through was not normal. And that's kind of where I developed the passion for, like, hey, I'm going back to my community. I ain't playing no games. I'm going to pour into the youth. I'm going to pour into myself, my heart and soul into it. And I'm just going to operate from a place of love.
For sure.
Because I got God. So I don't fear nothing. I don't fear failures. I don't fear losing. I did that already. So I know what it feels like.
Real talk.
When I was in prison, I lost 14 years of my time.
Man.
I lost my mom, my best friend. I lost uncles and aunties, and I lost time with Melvin Slaughter, my daughter. You know what I mean? So I know what it feel like to lose.
Man.
I'm trying to win now. So I told myself this is the way to win, is to really invest into myself and invest into my community in a positive way. You know what I mean?
So how important is the consulting element of proper management?
For me and the community, I feel like it's very important, because what we do at proper management is not just a one-trick pony. We want to tackle of course, relationships, right? I feel like relationships is like the most important because you're teaching people how to be co-workers. You're teaching people how to be, you're guiding them, I should say, on how to be, good parents by pouring into their cup, right? The relationships with your boss, relationships with another entrepreneur. A lot of people always say, then what you know is who you know. Yeah, there's two elements to that. It's what you know and it's who you know. And, when you educate yourself and then good people, then that's how we get back to community. That's how we're able to build healthy relationships. So not only are we dealing with relationships, we're dealing with the financial literacy, teaching people about personal credit, teaching them about business credit, teaching them about entrepreneurship, on how to properly open their business, how to get business funding, the mental health aspect. Because a lot of us have anxiety, we just didn't know how to identify it. So we want to teach them that. You know what I mean? Just the well-balanced of each aspect so that when you go back into this community, you can thrive and not just survive.
Real talk.
You know what I mean?
Real talk. Give me 3 key things that are important for a man or a woman transitioning back into the community from prison. And I mean to highlight reentry when I'm speaking on that. You know what I'm saying?
One of the most important things to me, in my opinion, is number one, your attitude. You know what I mean? A lot of times when we come out of these systems, we're so conditioned, and some of us have so much resentment that our attitude sucks. We come from a world where we're hustling and we're our own boss, and then you got to go work for somebody. And sometimes you got to start at entry level, and it's okay. I did it. You know what I mean? I've got out, worked a job, and started the business. And if I can do it, you can do it too.
Exactly.
So one of the things for me is your attitude. Number 2, your work ethic. A lot of people I ain't gonna say don't know, but just don't want to go the extra mile to put in their work ethic once they get the job. Once you get the job, your work ethic's gonna speak for itself. You know what I mean? So when you work hard, people see you working hard, they want to promote you. Next thing you know, you got a raise. Next thing you know, in my daytime job, you're getting moved to a truck. You go from a flagger, now you got your own truck. Now you're making $80,000 a year. 80,000 is ain't nothing to sneeze at. You can go buy a house in 2 years.
Real talk.
Build your credit, move up in the chain. Now you're buying a house in 2 years. So it's just about your attitude, your work ethic. And then for me, the number one most important is integrity. Having integrity. Once you get in these positions, knowing how to do the right thing even when nobody's watching you. Because that's how you build your personal bank. That's how you build your personal equity. You know what I mean? Having that integrity.
Where do you feel the direction of your brand, your company, and your business is going? Because I want to talk about, what you got up and coming. You got a big brunch that you're throwing coming up in July. So we want to talk about that, and we want to highlight some of the things that you want, the community to know, the world to know, et cetera, et cetera.
Proper management, of course, we want it to be a worldwide firm where we offer every service that is needed up under one umbrella. So our goal is to, of course, grow and expand and be sustainable, where we got multiple services that we provide under one umbrella. Just to highlight a little bit about what I was saying about having a mental health aspect in the building, having financial literacy in the building, having mentorship and coaches in the building, just a more innovative, hands-on approach. Because when I got to the halfway house, I seen a need. And a lot of times we get to these halfway houses and we're just checked off the books for paperwork reasons. You might be there struggling mentally, and we want to be able to meet those needs. You might be a step further and got a plan, but you need some support. We want to be there to help you with the support of your business. You might just want to start off entry level and working. Okay, we got jobs. And for those that don't know, I'm doing all of this currently while I'm navigating the halfway house, just to show people,
while you're transitioning yourself.
Yes, because I want to show people that you can do it, right?
It can be done.
So I just, my ideal for proper management is just to be a worldwide innovative brand that touches on every single level, every single spectrum under one umbrella. So when you do come, you don't got to be pulled in 10 different directions to be able to get accomplish your goal and bring out your vision. You know what I mean? We want to be able there from the beginning stages to support that. And when I got there and I seen that need, that was really one of the catalysts why I wanted to just get straight to it. I ain't even want to play no games. I'm doing it with no funding from the ground up, working an entry-level job, stacking my money, building my credit, and I'm going into these establishments saying, hey guys, here's the data, this is needed. Let's get to it. Like, what else are we talking about here? You're seeing it in real time. You know what I mean? So
that's beautiful. Where are some of the places that, you know, men and women that are transitioning can sign up for the services? They can find you. Is it IG? Is it anything that you want to let them know? Because people might watch this like, oh shit, I just got out, man. I need to get with them guys. You know what I'm saying?
Yes. Log on to the website www.propermanagementconsulting.com or www.solutionsforseattle.com. You can find me on IG, Mr. Melvin Slaughter, or IG Proper Management Consulting, or Facebook, Melvin Slaughter. All my contact information is on there. You can call me directly. It ain't a 1-800 number. Man, hit me directly, man. And whatever resource I got available to me, I'm gonna share with you, and I'm gonna point you in the right direction. And we're gonna be there of service in real time.
So let's talk about this brunch, man. How did you come up with the idea? Delegate the team? Come with the star players, individuals, and speakers, and vendors, and everything about this event you got going on. Let's highlight that. Let's talk about that into closure of the interview, because that's something that's coming soon in July, and we need everybody to be focused on that because it's big.
Yes. Well, the Blueprint Brunch. So, shout out to my team. Our idea behind the Blueprint Brunch was to highlight all of the players, the change makers, the innovators, the visionaries that have already laid out the blueprint. You know, because I've been watching behind the scenes, you know, of course, when I had my phone in the joint. Shout out to bro. I was inspired, man, when I look to my city and I see you doing podcasts. I look to my right, I see bro and them got a t-shirt company. I look to my left, I see, you know, sis got a coffee shop. I was just inspired. So the idea came, dang, I want to bring everybody together under one roof. Let's have a panel discussion. Let's offer some solutions for Seattle and Tacoma. Shout out to the whole Washington. And bring everybody together. Let's have a panel discussion. Let's talk about solutions, but let's also get back to community. A lot of people got individual things going on, and they might support each other on social media, but we want to get back to supporting everybody in real time. Let's go to these pop-ups. Let's spend some money in the community. Let's be a connector to Bro's podcast. You know what I mean? Let's really get back to community, because I feel like if we get back to how the old Seattle was, bro, we can't be stopped in our city. Like, there's nothing that we can do. We got the Microsofts of the world coming together. We got the Jeff Bezos. All of these people ain't even from our city, but they come here and they, you know what I mean? They start billion-dollar companies, and then they end up buying up our whole city and running our whole city. This is from where we from. So that was kind of the idea behind the Blueprint Brunch. And I just want to give a big shout out to my team, man. Without them, none of this would be possible, because I work full time too. So they help out with a lot of different things. And I'm very grateful and I'm very appreciative to the team, you know, at Proper Management and Solutions for Seattle. You know what I mean? So, and shout out to my daughter too. She helped out with a lot too.
For sure, man. I appreciate you coming through. Appreciate you having this discussion, this interview, you know, opening up about your struggles, your past, your successes, your failures. A lot of people are, you know, insecure to even talk about where they come from. That's why they don't know where they're going. Because, you know what I'm saying? Real talk, man. So, you know, Game 365 podcast, Melvin Slaughter, Proper Management Consultant, man. We out.
Yes, sir. PM.